Hello, everyone. I am Shaurya Thapa of Borrowing Tape, and today I'm joined with acclaimed Palestinian director and writer Annemarie Jacir. Today we're talking about her new film Palestine 36, which is a historical drama on the Arab revolts in 1936 against British colonial rule in Palestine. The film came out last year here in the UK and other parts of the world. It's releasing in the US now and was Palestine's official submission to the Oscars. Congratulations for the film being out, and welcome to the podcast, Anne Marie.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Before I ask my first question, I just wanted to tell our listeners that this is an ambitious film in the sense that it has a very wide scope. We see not just the locals of Palestine revolting against a colonial system, we also see the talk between the said colonizers, how the British divided this land. And we see how all of this eventually also precedes the Nakba, it's the displacement of Palestinians from their homeland. So my question to you, Anne-Marie, is that what inspired you to take on such multiple narratives, and what inspired you to focus on this particular era of Palestinian history?
Yeah, I first the last part of your question first is that it's such an important era, and I think one that is not explored enough, and that's why I was interested in exploring it more deeply. It's an incredible moment, as you said. This mass uprising against British colonial rule, and one that also didn't happen in a vacuum. The British were already in Palestine for almost 20 years at the start of the film, 1936. And there were anti-colonial movements happening in other parts of the Arab world, against the French, the Syrians, and you know that and they're all sort of connected. But it's really an incredible moment, and a very modern moment, where somebody like Yusuf can leave his village and move to the city, and then the world is changing. And even in the ports, scenes with like a character like Khalid, many young men, because of the suddenly there was an industry at the ports and there was work. People were leaving their villages for the first time and becoming part of other things, and there was a big part of that life at the port where were men who were working to support their families. And it's all in the lead up before World War II. And I wanted to explore it, and I wanted to explore it through many different characters and not just one character. I didn't want to do it in the sort of classic way of one character who takes us through the whole thing, because I think it's such a layered moment. I think there's so much happening, and the very fact that it's a people's revolt, it was a farmer-led people's revolt, that it made sense to me to have the different threads of many different characters who all make up in their own ways part of this revolt, whether it's in a very small way or it's in a more direct way. That was something that I wanted to do, and not to have the one hero. There is not that one hero. There is a group of people who sort of tell the story of this moment.
I feel like how you explained there's so much diversity in the characters and the viewpoints, but I also see that diversity in the literal sense and the geographical sense because we see the green olive groves of Palestine, like more of the rural hinterland, but then we also see the ports, we see the changing cities. So, how challenging was it to recreate this Palestine of the 1930s? And also, more importantly, where did you recreate this Palestine, considering the present situation?
Yeah, that it was the biggest challenge of my life to recreate this Palestine of the 30s, because, as you said, there's the ports, there's the village, there's the city, and there's many different people, and there's many different classes that are all coming up against this moment, and in some cases against each other. The original plan for the film was to shoot it entirely in Palestine. The main location of the village was, we found a village in the West Bank, in the Northwest Bank near Salfit, where we started to work and restore the village and plant the crops and rebuild this village in the way of the 1930s. And for me, the port sequences in Jaffa, I really insisted that we film those in Jaffa. And Jaffa has changed a lot. Of course, it's been ethnically cleansed of its, Palestinian population pretty much. And the port has changed a lot. It's sort of become now a luxurious, luxury apartments for and tourist, spot. So the preparation work for Jaffa involved a lot of discussions with the VFX team and figuring out within our budget how we could film in this city the scenes and how to cheat it and how to do it in a way that it would be actually Jaffa, but we would have to, of course, erase, the skyline of the city, Tel Aviv skyscrapers over there and, this and that. So that was a lot of prep work went into that. And then Jerusalem was Jerusalem. I always planned to shoot in Jerusalem and we were going to find our way despite, military occupation. We would find our way to film in Jerusalem. And then we had a lot of the other scenes were supposed to take place in Bethlehem, like the Atif house, the couple from Jerusalem. We had a beautiful home in Bethlehem, which we set up for that. So, of course, after October 7th, we lost all of those locations and we were not able to film in almost any of them, but particularly the village, we lost to, it was not possible to film there. So we ended up filming the village scenes in Jordan, as well as some other scenes, and eventually coming back to Palestine to finish the film. And we shot in Jaffa and in Jerusalem and in Bethlehem.
I believe a film like this, which is set in such a monumental era, 1936, and until like events preceding Second World War, what kind of historical or archival research went behind this film? Because you also wrote the screenplay, and I can imagine it would be, you have to respect all sides or so many players you have in your script, and just what kind of research went in preserving the memories of these characters?
A lot of research in different ways. There was the personal research, which begins with my own parents and relatives and this period that I'd heard a lot about, and the stories of people that I know, their parents or their grandparents who lived this period. A lot of oral histories, a lot of talking about what happened and from their point of view. Then there was the academic research, which was I'm so lucky, God bless academics, because there's just been an incredible amount of work done on the period in every aspect in terms of cultural life, social life, economic. There's tons of stuff written just about the ports, for example, the whole situation at the ports. There's stuff about the villages. There's stuff Palestinian and Arab academics, stuff by British academics, war historians, and Israeli historians as well. I just read everything I could really get my hands on. And, that was a big part of it. And then there was the archival research, which you mentioned, which really opened up a lot of things for me in terms of visualizing because Palestine is destroyed. Most of these cities and places that you see in the archives just simply don't exist anymore. And that was very important to look at in so many ways, just what life looked like, what people looked like, what people wore, what people did, how, and how also it tells you a lot about how the British looked at us from up here looking down, in the way that, these archives are images of our homeland and our ancestors, but the way they're shot from this British newsreel point of view and the things that are said, the kind of arrogance of, the arrogance of control of is very much, you could see it. They were putting out these newsreels and sending them all over the world from all their colonies, um, to explain, all the great things they were doing. And they're fascinating to look at for that. So I think it's a combination. All that research was a combination of so many things, and then of course all the crew members that I work with, my production designer, my costume designer. There's all the research and work and discussions we do together, and then there's the stuff that they do. All of they went down their own. The costume designer can talk about costumes forever in the different villages and what people were wearing, and the different, some villages women were wearing, sirwal, like pants underneath the skirt. Some villages, yeah, they didn't do that. Like he could tell you everything about it. So everybody had their own research as well.
That makes so much sense because I feel even in today's media landscape, at least within Western media, there is a certain image of Palestine that is sold, like even in terms of like just portraying them as victims. But in your film, we see like the locals, having exercising some kind of assertion of their rights. So like Hiyam Abbas, who's in the film, like you can see her trying to rebel against these people, these British people stealing a homeland. And of course, we have the Arab rebels on the horsebacks firing guns. And that seems like a very empowered image for, Palestinian cinema on a global scale. So even when it comes to like the battles, because I'm not just talking about the battles fought on horses or with guns. There are moments where I see children and local just picking up stones and sticks, whatever they can have. So how important was it for you to kind of stage that kind of action, but at the same time not make it too over dramatic as well?
Yeah,
Like, to keep it grounded in reality, but also to make it empowered, like make these
yeah.
characters empowered.
It's an interesting question, and actually position that you outlined, because for me, we have had the short end of the stick. We have, politically, but we are not, like, I don't have that attitude. Poor us. And I really am. What I think in all my films, and not just this one, is that I really am amazed by and admire and want to, talk about our resistance, human resistance, that, that we resisting oppression, resisting, like, in whatever form it is. Like, I think that's something to celebrate and actually to be proud of. Are we perfect? Are we angels? No, we made a lot of mistakes. We make a lot of mistakes. I try to talk about that in the films. I try to, and that's in 1936, Palestine 36. There is, you see those sort of mistakes that were made. But in general, I think that I'm very much rooted in the belief that, there is something very beautiful to tell the story from our point of view. Yes, we did have the longest strike in history at that moment. Yes, we were organized. Yes, our farmers led a revolt that the British couldn't control. They, with all their military might, they could not control it. There's a lot to be proud of. And that doesn't mean that, you're not also critical about certain things. But I think that is what we are, is that we're so used to, I think, getting, mainstream, media's distorted vision of us, and this distorted story of our people. But I don't, I'm not interested in reacting to that. I don't want to react to that. I don't care. I mean, we all know they did that. They've done that with every community. Hollywood has, like, done that with every single community since the beginning of time. Whether it's like it's at the moment, if it's Asian, if it's black, if it's, they just go through, like, whoever politically, depending on what the American foreign policy is at the moment. But I'm not interested in that conversation. I think we really have to do things for us and from us.
As you just mentioned, Hollywood and the West, I feel like every community, even if they get represented overseas, there might be some kind of, tokenistic kind of representation. It's like as per the West's convenience. And now, we're at a time when, I mean, Palestinian cinema has existed for decades, but it seems now that there's more global recognition at awards and film festivals. I mean, there's your film, there's All That's Left of You by Shaurya and Dabis, The Voice of Hind Raja. No Other Land won an Oscar last year. But like while you see all of that global recognition for Palestinian storytellers like you, but then there also might be times when you see that these media, these awards, these critics, they're celebrating Palestinian cinema, but not actually engaging with the politics or the realities that these films might portray. So, as a filmmaker and as a Palestinian yourself, how does that make you feel? Sometimes does it like ever frustrate you, or are you above all this?
Look, I want to, I want to say I don't. Yeah, I'm above all this. I don't care about these sort of accolades and these things. But what they are good for is that it helps get the films to an audience that might not always be able to get to it. That's the only benefit to me of all of these sort of whether it's the Oscars or whether it's whatever Cannes or whatever. It's is that the film maybe will be given more of a life because we're all struggling with distribution. We're all struggling to find our audience. And I think there is a lot to celebrate, like you said, about Palestinian cinema or Palestinian stories, but I think it would be naive to think that anything has really changed. I don't think anything has really changed in that way. There were no Palestinian films in Cannes this year. And all these films you just mentioned, none of them were there. There's yes, we notice like when we get like something good, but we're really still really left out of the picture, and it's really still a struggle. And that these films don't have mainstream distribution, that people are still afraid to touch these stories. I think we have to keep our finger on that.
Talking about distribution, while Palestine 36 has been backed by companies like BBC Film, BFI, and Watermelon Pictures, which is leading producer for many Palestinian films, still, how difficult was it to get funding or the right distribution for a project like yours? Because as much as I know, it's been banned or censored in Israel as well. So,
Yeah.
what were the challenges with just getting this film out?
It was challenging. I mean, it took about, 7 years to finance this film. It takes a long time. Now, granted, this was a big film. It's bigger than my other films, but all my films take this long. It's very hard to find partners, to find funding, and many people will flat out say we're not interested in Palestine, we're not interested in this story, we're not interested in the politics. And I don't think things have gotten easier. I think, since I started, maybe we find different ways to finance things. And you know, but I've never had any kind of sort of mainstream funding. Now, BBC and BFI getting on board was was something, but it's because the executives that were behind the BBC and BFI taking the executives behind that supported Palestine 36 specifically were very much aware that this is the British story as well. It's not just a Palestinian story, it's the British story. The British who were everywhere and colonized so many places, and that they still don't talk about, and they still don't teach in their education system, and they still don't, in our early meetings, they were very supportive. They said it's about time that Brits face their colonial past, and none of them had any kind of creative requirements or conditions on me. That the film is very tough on the British. There was not a moment of anyone suggesting maybe you should make it lighter for the audience, or maybe you should make it a bit easier for the audience. So in that way, I feel very lucky for that. I also had a lot of women. Like at one point, I had a Zoom call with all my sort of executive producers, and there was this one Zoom call where it was like all women. There were like 9 women on the screen, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is like so amazing!" And it was all women of color, by the way. And I thought, and in my life, actually, I never imagined that 10, 15 years ago. So yes, sometimes I feel like good things are happening, but I think we're still so far away.
And Marie, what I also found noteworthy about your film is it has such a stacked cast. Like you just mentioned British, like you have great British actors, but you have great Palestinian actors, like I mentioned Hiam Abbas before, who we love, like global audiences also love from Rami and Succession. You have
Yeah.
Saleh Bakri, who I absolutely admired, and All That's Left of You. And then you also have really good British actors like Jeremy Irons, Robert Aramayo from I Swear, and Liam Cunningham, who was in the flotilla himself. He's in it as well. So, what's the experience been like to work with such a diverse and talented cast across
It was
different cultures?
I'm so blessed. I feel so lucky to have had that great cast with me. And whether it was, yeah, like, first time actors, a lot of them new faces acting for the first time. Salih Bakri, who you mentioned, is my longtime partner. We began our first film together, and we still work together. And then to have, like, somebody like Jeremy Irons or, Liam Cunningham on set, and also their participation was very much one of solidarity. They participated in the film because they believed in the film and they wanted to support it, and, Jeremy was very upfront about that. He said, "I don't know if it's helpful for you, but if it is, I'd like to be in the film." He proposed it, and of course it's helpful when you're trying to finance a film and you have, like, an A-lister like Jeremy Irons, willing to participate. It was really special, and, Liam, it was a no-brainer for Liam. He's so politically engaged, and he's Irish, and, he was great because he keeps reminding us, You guys have been under occupation for this long, but we had it for 700 years, so patience." And now it's like, so yeah, and it was incredible. I could tell you stories about, each one of them, but I feel really lucky that I had that great cast, and also that I didn't lose them when we had to change locations and everything was falling apart. We had to stop and start so many times that I got to continue with the same cast. That was really amazing.
Lastly, Anne Marie, I wanted to point out that Palestine 36, it can be heavily emotional and dark in parts in the way it shows displacement. But I felt like towards the end, especially, there's always an underlying hope and resilience in the story. And I mean, seeing families and people still holding on with like slogans, with their weapons, their resistance, as you mentioned earlier. So, how important was it for you to make this film a story of hope as well, especially in the current times?
Yeah. Yeah, because it is devastating, and the film, it's a devastating there are very, devastating moments in the film, but I didn't wanna end it there because I think that's also part of paying homage, to the story of resilience, is that we do continue. Palestinians continue, and it's been generation after generation, and it's the next generation, it's the now generation, that we don't have to know. In a way it's an open-ended ending, where she's going, what she's doing, but for me, absolutely, it's there's something very beautiful and hopeful in that moment, and we watch the story of 1936 today. The audience is in the room watching it today. We know that in 10 years is the Nakba for these characters. All of them will basically become refugees, including Khulud and Emir, and that house that they're living in that neighborhood they're living in, is ethnically cleansed in 10 years. So we know that, we come with that as an audience, more or less. Some people, of course, don't. Maybe they're more as a clean slate, but most of us, I think, know that. And I think that that is the thing to celebrate, is that we keep going, and we have to believe, and we have to fight for that hope.
That's a really, hopeful note to end this interview with, and I hope this film gets more recognition and it reaches more people. And it was lovely talking to you, Anne Marie. And
Thank you.
congratulations once again.
Thank you very
Continue,
much.
please.
Lovely talking to you.
Yeah, same over here. Well, I mean, just to like reassure you, like at least in London, I'm based in London, there were like many sold out screenings that we saw, and like there were many people who were like really moved. So, like,
Yeah.
I hope cinema is doing what you set out to do. So, thanks
Yeah.
a lot again for your
Thank
time.
you. Thank you.